Hello everyone, welcome back to our knowledge capsules. In this particular capsule, we are going to talk about the carbon market in Colombia and how the experience of this market and its evolution have generated a whole ecosystem that is being developed around compensation mechanisms and emissions trading mechanisms, for example. It began in 2015 after the Paris Agreement was signed, and in 2016, the Colombian government set a carbon tax on fossil fuel consumption. In 2017, after Decree 926, compensation or non-causation of tax is defined during delivery of carbon credits withdrawn for carbon tax implementation, and the process of compensation or non-causation of tax is defined. This creates an intriguing mechanism because the market will be established on the entirety of the compensation process and the advantage that fuel consumers can obtain by actively participating in this compensation process. Later, in 2018, the National Emission Reduction Registry was established for accounting in Colombia. And in the year 2022, there was a new tax reform that modifies certain forms of the carbon tax. Finally, in the year 2023, the prices of the carbon tax are clear depending on each of the different types of fuels. Now, in this graph that we show below, we want to demonstrate an example of how the non-causation process works and what benefits it brings to sustainable development. Let's assume a company consumes 100,000 gallons of diesel, emitting around 1,000 tons of CO2, and will pay a tax of approximately $4,400 in total. Now, if we give him the opportunity to generate that compensation, he will be suddenly incentivized to buy that amount of CO2 for $4,000, generating an economic incentive that goes directly from this fuel consumer to the mitigation initiative developer. By employing this approach, this direct economic incentive is generated, and the fuel consumer will perceive it as a potential saving opportunity. Now, it is also important to consider that the 1,000 tons of CO2 that were eliminated in favor of tax compensation or the non-concession process will be included in the country's accounting to meet the NDCs. In the graph provided below, we can also identify how the process of carbon tax offset has generated a constant growth over time in the money flows that go towards sustainable development, and also in the money flows that go towards the tax directly and contribute to environmental conservation efforts. Those money flows truly reflect the amount of money that has the potential to be directed towards these mitigation initiatives, indicating the extent of financial support for them. All this is achieved thanks to some quite ambitious goals that the Colombian government has in order to achieve its goals defined by its NDCN by 2030, which amount to around 169 million tons of CO2 in 2030. All of this is part of a mechanism that needs to be discussed, needs to be directly articulated between the carbon tax, the emissions trading system, and other mitigation and adaptation mechanisms that are developed in the government's framework. In this graph, we can observe the growth of the carbon tax over time. It increases with the CPI plus 1% and generates processes where money goes directly to mitigation projects. Furthermore, a portion of the money is allocated towards collection and taxation by the state, which is directly associated with the carbon tax and its implementation. And this money should be implemented in issues such as, for example, the peace process or the development of other sustainable development projects.